Hello, everyone, and welcome to our free masterclass, Craft Compelling Research Stories. I'm actually quite excited that I will be with you, with Katia Mutino, during this masterclass. Today, actually, this is one of my favorite topics about how to make our research, what we do in the lab, memorable and connecting with our audience. But just first things first, I would like to give you a little bit about myself. My name is Osama, and I'm a pharmacist by training, and I have a PhD in neuroscience. I was a postdoc and a senior scientist, and then currently I'm the co-founder of Advice for Life Scientists, along with Dr. Katia Mutino. And this is essentially a platform that we would like to help all scientists at the different levels of their career to succeed and to be happy in the lab. But the most important thing here is that I was a scientist, I am a scientist, and I have been through everything. So I started maybe 17 or 18 years ago to work in the lab, and I had a lot of obstacles. And one of which is the one that we are discussing today, is how to really present the work that we are doing in the lab in an engaging, compelling way, where people are very satisfied with the science that you are providing them, and at the same time you can impact the community and the audience with your science. So there is a common situation that happened to me in the beginning of my scientific career as a scientist. Back then I was doing my master's in the States. It was after a year and a half of starting my master's, almost at the end of my master's project. And I'm sure that this, you would relate, some of you watching this would relate. I was asked actually to give a presentation about the work that I've been doing for a year and a half in a specific conference. And this conference, not a very big conference. Back in the day, I was working with a model organism, Drosophila, so a fruit fly. And if any of you worked with model organisms, you would know that there are certain meetings that involve only people who are working on this model organism. So I remember in the States, there was a fly meeting. So all the people who are working with Drosophila would meet in order to get the updates about the research using Drosophila as a model organism. And I remember that I was very excited that finally I had the chance to attend a meeting, not as a participant, like normal attendee, attending the seminars only, but also to give an oral presentation or to give a talk about what I've been doing for a year and a half in my master's project. I've been working on my presentation, trying to really put together all the data that I've been collecting. And I was really doing exactly what all my fellow colleagues in the lab were doing, the other senior PhD students, and even my boss was doing, which is basically collecting all the data that we have from the project and trying to present it to the audience. And I remember that day when I went on my presentation, I was very excited. But then after I started my presentation in front of a lot of people in the room, I started actually noticing that after a minute or a couple of minutes that people are losing interest, fidgeting around. Some of them got their phones out of their pockets, flicking through the screens. Others actually were engaged doing other things, reading papers in their hands or opening their laptops and working on it. So it was off-putting for me. I was actually kind of frustrated that this happened. It was clear for me that people are not into what I'm presenting to them. They are not engaged. They are kind of bored. And also, this affected me for the rest of the minutes that I had on the stage, because I had 50% of my mind focusing on what I did wrong, why the people are not engaged, right? And the performance itself of the delivery was affected, of course. So I forgot things, and it was a mess. It was a disaster. It was the first experience to really give a presentation in front of a big audience, outside of the lab meeting, of course. But at the same time, it was a horrible experience. And since that day, I decided to really dissect what happened wrong and really tweak and try to learn how can I improve this and how can I get the audience engaged all the time. And I think this is a very common situation because we had a lot of our students and colleagues complaining about the same issue, that people, after a couple of minutes or even 5 minutes of starting a presentation, they lose interest. And this would be the reaction of the people in the room, whether you are giving a lab meeting to your colleagues even, like a seminar in the department, or in even a bigger meeting or a congress where you are giving a presentation, after a few minutes, you will find the majority of people in the room either bored or doing something else. Not only this was frustrating for me, but also sometimes when I'm in a family gatherings and I'm trying to explain why I spend long hours in the lab, and sometimes why I turn down certain invitations to dinners here and there and the family gatherings, like family members who I really care about the most, I cannot explain what I'm doing in the lab properly to them. So this is quite frustrating to me as well. And sometimes when I sit with friends who are non-scientists and I'm trying to explain what I'm doing in the lab, after like a minute or two, also I find that it is quite difficult when I mention certain details about my projects or the science that I'm executing in the lab. It is very difficult for non-scientists and for my friends to really grasp. And here comes the main problem. The problem that me back in the day and a lot of my colleagues and my students are struggling with is to have a connection with the audience, have an engagement with the audience, keep the audience always entertained and always engaged with what we are presenting. So essentially, it is the science that we are executing in the lab, of course. And it is very frustrating that we cannot get the people, when we are presenting our data and our projects, to be engaged and to care about what we are doing, because we really like what we are doing. And it's a pity that we are spending the majority of our time in the lab executing experiments, designing experiments in our projects, analyzing data, and interpreting the results. But we spend very little amount of time really working on how we will be able to present the science that we are conducting in the lab to the audience in a digestible manner and entertaining manner at the same time. So first, it needs to be easy for them to grasp. And the second thing, it needs to be entertaining for them to keep engaged all the way through the presentation. Okay, so that is the problem, that we cannot connect or bridge what we are doing in the lab to the audience. So why it is really important to be able to really transform the science and connect with the audience in order to deliver what we are doing in the lab? It is actually important because no one would really care about what we are doing or how much we are doing until they know how much we care. Essentially, people need to understand what we are doing really well. And once they understand what we are doing, they will really like our passion and the amount of time that we are spending in the lab to do the project and to work on the science that we are doing. And once they like what we are doing and think that it's important that we are doing, they will tell other people about what we are doing in the lab. And this will actually boost the impact of the research that we are conducting and the science that we are conducting, and we can convince public and even stakeholders to invest money and to get more funding even for our research. So it is actually quite important, this. And of course, there is the other aspect, which is not only the funding that we will get from making people understanding what we are doing and how important it is, but also the self-esteem. Once we know that the people understand and realize how important this type of research that we are conducting, then this as a feedback on our psyche and our self-esteem will be very high. So the impact will be very high, and we will continue what we are doing best, which is basically research. So how to fix this problem? So to fix this problem, it's actually easy to say, but very difficult to realize, which is basically we need to connect with our audience. So connecting with our audience, what does that mean exactly? So we need to relate. We need to make people care about what we are doing. And in order to build this connection with the audience, we need to do two steps. So the solution is essentially our two-step solution. The first step, and very important step, is to distill our message. So what exactly is the message that we would like for it to come across to the audience? This is the first step. We need to make our message very clear, because a lot of people, including myself back in the day, sometimes I just present data and the message itself is not clear. What I am trying to deliver, what I am trying the audience to know about what I'm doing in the lab. So we need to work on the message. So we need to concentrate and to see what is the message for this presentation, for this audience, because it will be different from one audience to another, from one presentation to another, and what is the message exactly. So this is the first step in the solution. The second step would be to transform this message. After we make sure that it's clear, we transform it into a narrative or a story. Why stories? We will discuss this later, why stories are very powerful and why they are very successful in order to keep the audience entertained and engaged. But let's focus on the first step, which is to distill the message itself. So in order to do so and to make the message very clear, there are certain pillars, cornerstones for the message itself to be clear. And I actually broke them down into 5 main pillars for the message to be clear. If we sit with ourselves and really address these 5 different pillars or cornerstones, we will have the message clear. And then we can proceed for the next step. So the first part would be the issue. The second would be the problem. The third would be the so what. The fourth would be the benefits. And finally, the solutions. Okay, let's take the issue. What is exactly the issue? First of all, when you are giving a presentation, what is the bigger picture that you are actually discussing in your presentation? This bigger picture could be the topic that you are talking about. So sit with yourself and imagine what would be the keywords that I would use online in order to find this topic. Like maybe you are working on cancer, working on epigenetics, working on neurodegeneration, working on whatever other topic, and it is quite big topic as an issue. So this first, you need to write down that this would be the issue or the bigger picture that you are addressing. So for example, I have an example for you, life on Mars. This would be the topic or the issue that you'd be addressing during your presentation. So this is figured out, 1 pillar out of 5. The second one would be the problem itself. So from which angle you are tackling the issue itself or the topic that you will be discussing, because cancer or neurodegeneration or epigenetics is a very big topic or very big issue. So from which angle you are addressing the problem. And here, this is very important. You need to narrow down the dimension that you are tackling the problem from. And for example, for the same topic, life on Mars, you would essentially tackle it from the point of view if life is possible on Mars or not, and what are the resources that are existing on Mars, if there are any resources for energy, for example, and what are the data that are the missions sending us from Mars, like the Mars rover, and to have an idea whether there are resources for energy and the planet itself can be habitable or not. So this would be the angle itself that you're addressing the issue from. And then the third pillar is the so what, or the reasons to care. This is essentially why me as an audience listening to your presentation or to your science or to your project, why do I care about what you are telling me? Okay, you told me about the topic, cancer, for example, or neurodegeneration or life on Mars. And then you told me that how you will tackle the problem, or what are the problems that you are tackling or the dimension that you are tackling it from. So what does that mean to me, or why do I care about what you are doing? So the so what kind of. And this is basically the impact. So you sit down with yourself and it will actually differ the reasons to care from one audience to another. So for example, you need to narrow down what are the values or what are the things that the audience care about the most. And then you try to find the message or tweak the message according to what the audience are caring about or value the most. So it is expected that the so what will be different from one audience to another. Like specialists in the field will care about other things other than lay public or people working in the media, right? So this we will see later on that it can be tweaked a little bit according to what are the values and what people care about, what the audience in this case care about the most. So in the case of the same example, life on Mars, there is a very interesting question. All of us have been asking this before, that are we alone in the universe? So this is basically a very interesting kind of so what, why do we care? Are we alone in the universe? This kind of research will address this kind of question. And also to discover if there are resources of energy, and that Mars environment is actually habitable for humans, whether we as humans living on Earth will be able one day to live on Mars or not. So this is very interesting, and this is why do we need to care as audience. However, I actually have something called the so what prism, which is basically you have the message, and this message or the so what of the message itself will be different from one audience to another. So let's see how this works. So the message and then the so what prism. So once you know who will be attending your presentation or you are presenting your work to which type of audience exactly, then the so what will be different a little bit. So it's basically highlighting aspects that this type of audience will be caring or valuing much more. Like in case you are actually presenting to managers, they care about the costs of your research, the time frame, the support that you have, the expertise, all these kind of things. So this is the so what part of why do they care about it. For scientists in the field, so they care about your research, if it is groundbreaking, is it going to be robust, how this will impact my work, for example, that I'm working in the same field or something like that. So this will be basically the other aspect that you will be highlighting in the so what part if you are addressing scientists. If you're addressing media, media care about that whether this is a good story, this research will generate good story, can we sell it, can we write about it. Lay public in general, when they are attending scientific talks, then they would actually be concerned with the effect on health or safety. Is it going to affect me as an individual who's living, and how these natural resources that can be found, for example, on Mars can affect me as a human being living in the community. So this is basically the so what that will be changing, or why the audience will care according to their values, right? And then the fourth pillar would be the solution. So what can be done? What can you do to address this problem? So you already talked about the topic, you talked about the problems or the angle that you will tackle the problems, so what, why this is important, why as audience we need to care about this. Okay, you need to provide the solution, how you will address the problem itself. And this is, for example, for the very same example that we are talking about, life on Mars, one of the solutions could be that you can compare the data from samples that you have in the lab that are simpler than the samples that we are getting from Mars, and then compare it with what the missions are sending from Mars to see if there are indeed energy resources on Mars. So that would be one of the solutions, how you tackle the problem. So you like mimic samples that you have in the lab on a small scale, and then compare it with whatever samples or the data that we are getting from the missions in Mars. And then finally, the fifth kind of pillar for the message itself to be clear, the benefit. So who will benefit from this and how this will help these people or us in general as audience. So what is the benefit of your research in general? And an example for that would be for the same life on Mars example that we are talking, is that we will know if there are other living entities living in the universe other than us humans on Earth or not. Also, it will tell us if there is or has been life on Mars and the energy resources that are there. So the part of the benefit itself, sometimes it appears very clear in your project. It depends on the project, which kind of project that you are working on. But other projects, sometimes the benefit itself would be the knowledge. So knowing a certain mechanism in the cell, or the knowledge itself would be the benefit. So of course, these kind of 5 pillars that I'm talking about in terms of the message, they would be different from one kind of topic to another, from one kind of field to another, but this is very important to make your message clear. So just to recap, the step number 1, to connect and to engage with the audience, you need first to make sure that your message is clear. So you can sit with yourself and then you say that I'm working on, and then the issue, which is the topic that you're working on, cancer, for example, or epigenetics, or neuroscience, or neurodegeneration, for example, as a topic. That would be the issue. Okay, this is clear, check. And then the second part of the message would be, what is the problem? So specifically, I'm examining this exact problem in the topic. And then followed by the so what, why people or the audience should care. So some people don't realize why this is important, but it is important because X, Y, and Z. Why do we need to care about this as audience, as people who are recipients for the presentation that you are sharing with them? And then the next step would be, and the steps or the solution that you are imagining that could target the problem and solve the problem. So we can take these steps to remedy the situation by, and then propose your solution that you are proposing through your research, essentially, right? And then finally, if we did this, or if we did so and so, then we will see amelioration or improvement in something, or the knowledge itself of such mechanism would be very helpful in X, Y, and Z. So this is basically the 5 cornerstones or the 5 pillars that make your message clear. So once you sit down and clarify all these 5 pillars of the message, then comes the next step of the solution, which is narrate as a story. So basically, we need not to talk about our work as data, but we need to tell stories about it. So here, why stories or storytelling in general is important? Well, because if your message is clear, why can't I actually present the message as is, as long as it's clear? I actually have my topic, I have my problems, I have the reasons why people need to care, I have the solutions, I have the benefits. So everything is clear. I just dump it to the audience as is. No. What makes people want to listen more and more, especially if you have an ample amount of time, like 30 minutes or 45 minutes or even 1 hour presentation, people will lose interest after some time. And if you are just going and presenting linearly your data or what you are doing in the lab, without any kind of anecdotes and something that is entertaining and keeps the tension high, then you will lose a lot of people in the audience. Yes, the message is clear, but it's not entertaining enough for them to keep going on for 30 minutes or 45 minutes listening to what you are doing in the lab. And stories in general, I would say that it's one of the ancient traditions that we are doing, irrespective of our cultures or backgrounds. Actually, stories are kind of the native language of humanity. So we think of stories, we tell each other stories on a daily basis when you are recounting how was your day to your partner, to your friends, what did you do in the weekend, what did you do in your vacation, all these things. This is basically recounting and telling stories. So we are born natural storytellers, and stories basically is part of the human experience. Actually, the human experience is little units, and these little units are stories. So stories are very powerful, and stories can inspire and can convince people. And if we can convince people to care about our research, we can boost the impact of our science, we can boost the impact of the research that we are conducting, and of course, we can get more funding to it, or people would be more interested of the kind of research that we are conducting, tell other people about our research, and really get a huge value and a huge impact of what we are doing in the lab. Okay, great. So packaging our science or our message that is clear as a story format is very important to make it entertaining and to make it much more impactful. So how can we do such thing? If we, for example, have on the y-axis the story tension, for every story there is kind of a tension that gets to the climax and then goes down. There is a problem that you need to surpass and then it goes down. And then you find a story progression. For every story there is a beginning, there is a middle, and then there is an ending. You will find that if you work on the pillars of the message itself, you'll find that this 5 pillars of the message that you sat down with yourself and tried to figure out and clarify will be basically taking more or less the same kind of format or the same arc of a normal story, any story that is there. And this is essentially would be that the issue, when you are start talking about the topic, this is very broad. You still don't have any tension whatsoever from the audience because the issue, you are just familiarizing people with the topic itself, right? And then after that, you will find you will be talking about the problems. So you would say that I'm addressing these problems from this angle, for example. And the tension will start building up. The climax of the tension will be essentially at the so what. When you addressing the so what, why people need to care about this will be basically your climax. And then finally, when you are proposing solutions, and then finally the benefits. So if you actually take this kind of graph where the story has a tension and then progresses until it ends, you'll find that it's exactly looking like a normal story arc in any story, whether it's an animated movie or a normal movie. You'll always find that the story starts with the context or the background, which is the topic in your research project. And then there is an inciting incident where there is something happened to this protagonist, for example. There is a background for the protagonist or the hero or the heroes of the story where something happened to them. So this is the problem, the inciting incident. And the climax is that how they will manage, or how the protagonist will manage to overcome these kind of obstacles or the problem that happened here that has been shown in a previous chapter of the story. And then will be the climax. And then the climax is followed by the resolution, or basically the proposed solutions, like in your research, the solutions that you are proposing in order to overcome the problems. And then finally, what would be the new normal? So what would be the new normal of this protagonist or these heroes after they resolved and they solved the problems that they encountered in the beginning of the story? And this is the new normal for them, or what would be the benefits in this case. You'll find exactly, it looks like the same. The issue, the problems, the so what, the solutions, and the benefits. And in this case would be the context, the inciting incident, the climax, the resolution, and then the new normal. So this is kind of a basic story arc. Of course, stories can be told from different angles, and there are different formats for stories. This is one of the basic formats of a story. And if you are packaging it into a story format, and you need to practice this, of course, you'll be able to really get your message that was already clear because you sat down and you clarified all these kind of pillars. You will be able to really deliver it as a story and not as data. And then you need to practice. What is really essential in this, it's not only to get the message clear, because it takes some time to really address the 5 pillars or the 5 cornerstones that we already alluded to earlier. But it all boils down into practice. What is going to work with people and what is clear and what is entertaining and not, especially when you are doing it in a format of a story. So here, what really important and goes hand in hand together is practice and getting feedback. So you package your clear message into a story format. You deliver it to your lab, for example, or to your friends, to your family, because of course, the story will be tweaked differently if you are addressing an audience who are lay public, like your family and friends, or if you're addressing scientists in the field, like, for example, your lab colleagues or your boss, or in a conference, for example. So you need to practice the story itself and the message that you are getting across with your family, your friends, your lab colleagues, and then getting a feedback. Only by getting the feedback, you'll be able to tweak it and to make it more entertaining, more engaging, and more compelling for the audience, of course. And this is basically it. So to recap and to wrap up what we have been talking about during this masterclass is that it is very important, the message. So the story alone, you will not be able to have a story unless you have the message clear. What the story, every single movie that you like, or every single story that you like, there is a clear message. There is a kind of implicit message that tries to really deliver through the story itself. So first, you need to work on the message, and we discussed already the 5 pillars of this message. And once they are clear, you try to package it in a vehicle, and this vehicle would be the story. And both together, having a clear message in an entertaining story will make a huge impact, will make it a very engaging and unforgettable and very memorable story or research and presentation for people to remember for a very long period of time. And just remember that your story really matters, irrespective what field you are working on, whether it's physics, chemistry, biology, or whatnot, anything else other than these fields. And you really need to share your story. So you need to talk about what you are doing in the lab in an entertaining, engaging way for people to know why you are spending these long hours in the lab. And if you would like to work on your research story and how to really formulate this research story that you are working on, whether in your current project or your PhD or in your postdoc project, we created already a workshop that will start this Saturday, so the 8th of October, and then there will be another session on the 15th of October. It's only 2 sessions, this workshop that we created, and it's basically bring your research to life. And you will learn how to really package your clear message or your science, the research that you are doing in the lab, in an easy way and entertaining way for your audience. These sessions will basically involve session number 1, so next Saturday or this Saturday, it will be the basics of storytelling. Today we just went quickly on stories. I didn't want really to enforce a specific type of method of storytelling because there are a lot of methods of storytelling, but this is not important. You can actually sit with yourself because every day we are talking to our friends, to our family about things that happens, and this is essentially story. This is a very small unit of a story. So I didn't want to enforce a specific style. You can have whatever style or whatever method of telling a story. And basically in the workshop, we will focus more and we will dissect what are the different types of storytelling and how you would be able to craft your research into a story. And then we give you 1 week to really digest the information that we will discuss in session number 1 on October the 8th. And you will have 1 week really to implement all the tips and the methods that we discussed during the session 1. And session 2, we will meet where you will have 10 minutes to really deliver your research story. So 10 minutes to really tell us about your research or about a project that you're working on currently or a previous project that you're working on in a story format. So the message needs to be clear, the story needs to be engaging, and you will get a detailed feedback about whether this story is entertaining, is compelling or not. And this is basically how we improve. So you prepare something, you deliver it, and you practice, and then you get feedback. And according to the feedback, you tweak it a little bit until it becomes a really good product and a really good story. This is not only for presentations, but in general, when we are doing science, either we give an oral presentation about our science, or we write it in terms of grants or in terms of manuscripts to submit for publications. And this also is the same. So I remember, because I published a lot of papers, that I actually take the same kind of strategy when I'm writing my papers. Because at the end of the day, it is how you would tell the story of your project to the editor or to the audience that are reading this kind of project for the first time. And it is more or less the same kind of format to make the message clear and how you make it engaging and you make your audience really read the article from cover to cover and not feel bored in the middle, and then you will leave reading your article. This is essentially the same method that I use for oral presentations and for manuscripts, whatever that I write. And this workshop will really help you at any stage of your career, whether you are doing your master's or PhD or postdoc. This would really help you and will put you on the right path. Again, there is no a magic wand to make you an amazing presenter and would be able to really create a compelling story from your research right away. But once you are on the right track, once you are trying to practice and get feedback, you will get better and better. And then you will actually stand out from the crowd, and you will not be just a regular scientist presenting their data in a conference, but you will be someone people would be waiting for their presentations and their stories to hear. So that's it from my side. If you have any questions, I would be happy to answer them. And if you don't have questions for the moment, you can actually follow us on our social media accounts. We have this handle at AdviceFLS, and you can go to our website, you can leave a message, or you can drop us an email, and we would be more than happy to answer all your questions.